Welcome to the Oracle. Today, we are talking about Kweku Ananse. Ananse, the spider, is a trickster whose many shenanigans often land him into trouble. If you live in West Africa or Ghana to be precise, then there is a great chance you have probably heard about the legendary Kweku Ananse and his eccentric family who spice up the Anansi stories. He is lawless, antisocial, and amoral. He often engages in activities directed at gratifying his instincts for pleasure without regard for social conventions, legal ethics, or moral restraints. If this is your first time hearing about this creature, then get ready to be awed, surprised, shocked, and maybe even feel a bit resentful. Ananse brings out all the emotions in us. Stories handed down from the older generations of grandparents tell of the many escapades of the famed trickster and some valuable lessons to be learned from this character. This is the story of how the world gained wisdom and knowledge because of Ananse. It is said that Ananse once gathered all the wisdom in this world and placed them in a pot. He then announced that he was going to climb the tallest tree in the world and place the wisdom pot in it to keep it from the grasp of everyone. That way, all the wisdom in the world would belong to him and him alone. He found the perfect tree, took a rope, and tied the pot in front of him. Ananse, the spider, who has a particularly large stomach, then attempted to climb the tree but failed, as his enlarged abdomen prevented him from climbing smoothly. After several failed attempts, his eldest son Intikuma, who was watching his father struggle, walked up to him and mockingly told him to tie the pot at his back to climb the tree. He brushed his son off initially, but later decided to heed his advice, and behold, he was able to climb the tree with the pot at his back. However, Ananse was hurt and angry at the fact that although he had collected all the wisdom in the world, his son was able to find a solution to such a simple problem that he, the one who had access to all the world's wisdom, could not. In a fit of rage, he smashed the pot on the ground. Legend says that most of the people who gathered under the tree to witness the bizarre scene by Ananse immediately picked up the wisdom that was spreading from the pot. However, those who were not present were forever labeled as fools due to their inability to get some of the wisdom. This is why the world is divided into wise and unwise people. A long time ago, Kweku Ananse, together with his family, lived in a village with other people. One day, during the farming season, Ananse, being a prominent elder in the village, called together all the village people and proposed that they all help each other work in turns on their various farms to ensure smooth work. He suggested that they begin with his cousin's farm. And so the next day, everyone gathered at Ananse's cousin's farm to help him. They would continue to help each other in this way until everyone's farm is done with. A few days later, Kweku Ananse, who didn't intend to help out the rest, feigned sickness. Some people started getting suspicious of him since he was known to be a notorious trickster. When Ananse saw that his sickness was arousing suspicion among the people, he called another gathering. At the meeting, he announced in a frail voice that he could feel his sickness getting worse by the day, and that he knew within himself that it would only be a matter of time before he dies. He then proceeded to lay out some funeral arrangements for himself. He asked that a comfortable grave lined with comfortable blankets should be dug for him on his cousin's farm, and that he should be buried there upon his death, since he admires the yams on the farm so much. He requested his family to put lots of cooking utensils in his grave as well. His final request was that his grave should not be covered after the burial. The family agreed to his wishes, since they didn't have the heart to turn down the requests of a dying man. A few days later, Ananse faked his death and was buried on his cousin's farm, just as he had requested. At night, Ananse would come out from the grave, uproot his cousin's yams and make a meal of fufu and soup for himself. He would then crawl back into the grave when daytime was approaching. Soon, his cousin realized that someone was stealing the yams from his farm. He was so disturbed that he went to the local carpenter and had him make a scarecrow for him. He then sent the scarecrow to the middle of his farm and applied sticky gum all over it. Then he left it there overnight. That same night, Anansi got out from his grave and was about to cook his usual meal. He saw the scarecrow from afar but thought it was a young child. He approached the child and lashed at it to go home to his mother. However, it wouldn't budge. So thinking that it was indeed a notorious child, he slapped it with his hand and it got stuck to the glue. He started screaming furiously at the child to let him go. Then he used his other hand to slap him as well, and it also got stuck. Still not thinking, he used both legs to kick it furiously and they also got stuck. He was left to his defenses, kicking and thrashing furiously at the scarecrow, which only caused the glue to tighten its grips more. As daylight was approaching, Ananse's cousin went to the farm and was shocked to see Kweku Ananse glued to the pole. However, Ananse was clever enough to manipulate him into thinking he was a ghost. Shocked beyond words, the cousin rushed back to the village screaming that he had seen the ghost of Ananse. The villagers went back to the farm with him to verify for themselves. Lo and behold, it was indeed Ananse. Ananse begged them frantically to release him from the scarecrow, arguing that he was a ghost and his spirit wouldn't rest in peace if he is still glued there. However, some people were smart enough to realize that a ghost wouldn't be stuck on a physical scarecrow. Immediately, they figured out that it was indeed Kweku Ananse in the flesh trying to trick them again. They pounced on him with heavy blows. When they had lynched him to their satisfaction, they left him there in shame. Legend has it that Kweku Ananse was able to free himself later and left town for good for fear of ridicule. As for how he was able to do it, we have no idea. It is said that there was a period when there was a very good relationship between God and mankind. The greedy Kweku Ananse and his wife also existed then. However, Ananse was dissatisfied with his wife and went to God to complain that his wife was eating all of his food and he wanted a new wife with no mouth on her face. Imagine that. A new wife with no mouth on her face. God assured him that he would grant his wish, and Ananse went back home in high spirits. The next morning, Ananse was overjoyed that he entered the kitchen and saw his new wife, who indeed had no mouth on her face. He greeted her just to be sure, but she couldn't reply because she didn't have a mouth on her face. The happy Kweku Ananse went to the market and shopped frivolously for foodstuffs. He was really happy because he thought that from then on any meal prepared by his wife would be eaten by him and him alone. However, that wasn't the case. Ananse began to notice that he was still buying the same amount of foodstuffs just as before, if not more, even though he was the only one eating the meal, or so he thought. He began scrutinizing his wife's activities to see what she was doing with the rest of his foodstuff, but he couldn't find her doing anything incriminating. One night, Anansi woke up to urinate and heard an unusual sound coming from the kitchen. He went to the kitchen to investigate and was beyond shocked to find his wife eating with her mouth hidden under her armpit. Feeling betrayed, he went to God the next day to complain. God, in all his wisdom, was quick to remind him that he requested a wife with no mouth on her face. He didn't specify that he wanted a wife with no mouth at all. Ananse felt subdued and asked for his old wife back and promised not to ever complain again. He was relieved when he saw his wife in the kitchen the next day. This story might just be a typical example of the popular saying that the devil you know is better than the angel you don't know. What do you think? This next story that is very popular in African homes is a fable about why the spider hides in the corners of our rooms. Of course, we all know that the spider here is Kweku Ananse. The story goes like this. One day, poor Ananse thought long and hard about how he had 4 sons and a wife, but couldn't take care of them. He then devised an uncanny plan to become rich. He went to the chief's palace the next day and lamented that he needed funds to get treatment for his dying wife. The chief, being generous, enlisted the help of prominent elders in the village, and they gave Ananse a huge sum of money to help his wife. Ananse used part of the money to buy a huge parcel of land and seeds for harvest the following week, all in the name of an unknown uncle outside the village. After that, he met most of the able-bodied youth of the village the next day at a popular palm wine joint and told them that he had an uncle who would like for them to plant his seeds for him. He promised to reward them generously, and they readily agreed. So Ananse would just sit by and relax while the youth worked hard on his farm. Conditions were favorable during the farming season, so Ananse reaped a fruitful harvest. He invested the profit he got from selling the foodstuffs in expanding the farm, and then used the rest of the money to buy a huge house for himself and his family. As his uncle outside the village that he said owned the farm never came to town, there was no one to pay the workers on the farm. Life was good for Ananse. However, his youngest son bragged to the chief's son about how his father used the wealth and hard work of others for his own good. The young prince also went to tell his father. The chief furiously called together all his elders and told them what had happened. In anger, they all marched towards Ananse's house with cutlasses and sharp objects. Since they were ranting in anger on the way, Ananse heard them from afar and knew immediately that danger was approaching. He then hid in a tiny hole in the corner of his house, never to come down again. And that, friends, according to our grandparents, is the reason why the spider always hides in the corners of rooms. So there you have it. The next time you visit a Ghanaian family or interact with a native, ask about the legendary Kweku Ananse and you will be wowed by his stories. Be sure to subscribe to the Oracle for more fun and engaging videos like this. See you on the next video.